Okay, I'm going to show you how to create dynamic images inside of Photoshop using variables and datasets. So the first step is to create a template, which I've already done here. And I've set up a layer to be a placeholder for my background image, a placeholder for my headline text, and my CTA text. These will all be linked to variables and then eventually to a dataset. So the next step is to create your variables. So in here I'm going to go to Image, Variables, Define. And I'm going to select the first dynamic layer, which will be my background image placeholder. And I want to be able to control the visibility of this layer and the image, which is the pixel replacement. I'm going to rename these background visibility and then background image. It's important to keep note of these variable names because you will need to use the same names in your data set, which we will get to in the next step. So next I want to set up my headline text layer and I want to control the text placement. So I'm going to name this variable headline text, and then I will do the same for the CTA text. Text replacement, CTA text. So all of my variables are set up, and you can see which ones have variables assigned to them by the asterisk that is next to the layer name. And now hit OK. And now we need to create the data set. You can do this inside of Photoshop by going to Variables, Image, Variables, Datasets. So you can create a new data set based on the current data set, which right now is the variables that we just set up. So if I click that, it will create one for each of the variables that I have set up: background image, background visibility, CTA text, and headline text. And then it has the value and the layer. And to create a new one, I would hit that again, which would duplicate this data set. And now I'd have data set 2, and then I could come here, I could change the value of my background image. So I could select this and have that as my background image, and then go between layer set 1 and 2. And then I can also come in here and change the CTA text. And you can see that updating over here. So that's one way you can set up the data sets in Photoshop. Another way is to do it with external data. So I'm going to cancel this. And I've already set up a spreadsheet in Google Docs that I'll show you here. And as you can see here, each header name is the same as the variables that I assigned in Photoshop. If these are not named the same, you will get an error when you import the data into Photoshop. Also, if you don't have the same number of variables as you do in this feed, you will also get an error. So I have the CTA text, the headline text. Another thing to note that's important is that if you want line breaks, you have to go in here and give it a hard line break. And to do that in Google Docs or Google Sheets, you need to hit Command or Control on Windows and Enter. Hitting Enter will just exit you out of that cell, so you have to hit Command or Control plus Enter to get that line break. The background image is the file path to your image, and the file path is relative to where your data file is saved to. So in this case, I have my images here. I'm going to save my data set here as well. And then the background visibility will take true or false, and it will hide or show your layers, or the layer that it's assigned to. So now I need to export or download as CSV file. And I'm going to bring that over here. I'm just going to rename it to data. This isn't necessary, but I like to do that. And then in Photoshop, I will come to File, File, Import, Variable Datasets. I'm going to select my data and open that. I'll leave my encoding to automatic. Use first column for dataset names will take the first column of your feed and use it to name each dataset. So for example, in our feed, we have CTA text as the first column. So each dataset will be named based on the CTA text. And then replace existing datasets will, like it says, replace any existing data that's already been imported. Now hit OK. If you get an error at this point, it's usually because your variables are not named correctly, or you don't have the same number of variables in your feed as you do defined in Photoshop. So make sure you double check and make sure your variable names are the same and you have the same number in your data set as you do in Photoshop. The next step is to apply your data sets. So go to Image, Apply Dataset. And as I said before, the name of each dataset will be the CTA text. So now we can preview each one by selecting each one. So for the second set, I had the background visibility set to false, so that will turn that layer off. And our third one. And that's how you preview. You can apply this to your template by hitting Apply, and that will update all your content. You can then come back and apply a different one. Okay, now if you would like to update any of the data in your data sets, you could go into your feed and change this data and re-export. Or you can do it directly in Photoshop by going to Image, Variables, Datasets. And in here you can change the content of your data, or you can import a new data sheet. I'm going to cancel that since we don't want to make any changes. So if you want to export your data sets as files, you have the option to do that. You go to File, Export, Datasets as Files. Now you only have the option to export PSDs. So we want to select the folder. I'll go ahead and create a folder here called Exports and choose that folder. And then you can set up, or you can select a data set or all, and you can set up your naming convention. And if you want to make this compatible on Windows, it will make sure all your file names will be compatible. So it's probably best to click those. Okay, and now we'll just hit OK. And if we go to our folder, you'll see that each one of them has been created, and they are full layered Photoshop files. So if you need to come in here and move your headline text around, or change the font size, you can do all that. There's 1, 2, and 3, and there you go.